more concerned with raising their families and practicing their traditions than rising up against China.
The Uyghur people are a Turkish people. Uyghur is our ethnic name, and of course we live in what we call East Turkestan, and what the Chinese government calls the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region.
Rabia Kadir is president of the Uyghur American Association. She was imprisoned in 1999 and later released into the United States after trying to meet with a U.S. congressional delegation investigating China's alleged human rights violations in Xinjiang.
The Chinese government said the Uyghur people would enjoy some degree of self-rule, and the Chinese authorities will respect the Uyghur people's language, culture, religious beliefs, and way of life. But of course, that is not happening. The Uyghur people have never enjoyed a minute of peace under Chinese rule.
The Xinjiang region in the northwest is a particularly important one because it's ethnically distinct and religiously distinct. This was one of the main areas the 9/11 response in the U.S. had an effect on U.S.-Chinese relations, because the U.S. government was willing to define any Muslim group as part of a sort of presumptively part of the terrorist threat in the world, and so it acquiesced to China's view that we're going to stomp down the people, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. This is familiar to America in its crudest era, kind of like the white U.S. Reaction towards Indian reservations. That is handled with incredible crudeness in China.
Our understanding is that the Chinese government doesn't seem to care very much about its image in the world, especially when it comes to severely persecuting the Uyghur people. Because the Chinese government uses our religious belief, Islam, as a card against us in the global war on terror.
It's different from Tibet. Westerners generally have quite a romance about Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism. They don't have about Xinjiang and Xinjiang Islam. So I think that's the main, that says more about the West than it does about the differences in Xinjiang and Tibet. It's a troublesome area for China because the people are ethnically different. There is a genuine separatist movement there that the government genuinely wants to suppress, and that's just an ongoing tension, which the West reacts to differently because it's Islamic.
3 security officers have been stabbed to death and another wounded in China's Xinjiang province. The attack took place at a road...
China sees itself in a struggle against the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which advocates the creation of an independent state of East Turkestan. It's on the United States list of terrorist organizations, though attacks from the group are rare. The question becomes whether China's response to this group is disproportional to the actual threat.
In the name of so-called bilingual education, the Chinese authorities began to impose the Chinese language and replace the Uyghur language. They began to gradually erase Uyghur people's language, scripture, literature, and the way of life. We consider this a sort of cultural genocide, to gradually eradicate the Uyghur people.
In the last several years, Xinjiang has witnessed a mass settlement of ethnic Chinese, who are provided government incentives and good jobs to move here. Mandarin is now required in schools, and there's a prohibition on children entering mosques. Those and other restrictions make it difficult for Uyghurs to pass on their culture to the next generation. Some consider it a forced assimilation with the mainland. Younger Uyghurs find themselves having to adapt to the Chinese way of life to compete and survive. Muhammad Ali, an ethnic Uyghur and Xinjiang citizen, explains.
In the big city, of course, the life speed is quite fast, so you have to catch up the life speed. Otherwise, you are in or you are out. So it depends on you. It's up to you. It's your choice. So if you work hard, you can achieve more. If you want to be a competitive person, you should have a master of Chinese.
What is to become of the Uyghur people? And what do China's restrictions on their cultural and religious freedom say about China's role as a responsible stakeholder in the world? Will Uyghurs remain a forgotten minority?
There are very few Uyghurs really want to get independent or want to rebel or whatever. But if the central government doesn't have a better policy to make the locals feel they are the masters of that region, it just doesn't work. No matter how much money you put in, it never works if you use the hard line to, tackle some of those issues.
As China's power grows, so do its responsibilities. Its strict control over ethnic minorities like the Uyghurs in Xinjiang is merely one issue of many. Its new role in the international community and growing income gap pose profound challenges for China.
If 10 years from now China is seen as having collapsed or failed, we'll all be able to look back and say, oh, of course, that was inevitable, because there are so many problems they have now. There is this gigantic mass of hundreds of millions of people who are really, really poor in the countryside. There are tremendous regional tensions and a fairly weak sense of Chinese national identity. There are really, really serious problems that make those facing the U.S. or Europe seem just trivial.
What will China produce? Will China innovate?
It's kind of amazing to get to come to an economy that is being born in front of your eyes.
If China becomes poorer, there are social disorder issues. If it becomes richer, there are both environmental consequences and a different sort of social order challenge. Will people be content with an authoritarian regime? I don't know.
Many questions remain as to whether or not China will overcome these challenges and remain a major global power in the 21st century. And there are lots of questions Americans should be asking themselves about China's rise, particularly what it means for the U.S. These are questions we hope you consider as you talk to others about China and the new global reality.